Tonight, in this podcast, I want you to picture this. You are sitting on the couch next to someone you care about deeply.
Yeah.
It might be your partner of, say, 5 years, or maybe a really long-term foundational friend.
Right, someone you really know.
Exactly. And the TV is playing some ambient noise in the background. The lighting in the living room is totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
And, from the outside looking in, a stranger would think everything is perfectly fine.
Just a normal Tuesday night.
Right. But inside your own body, you feel like there's an entire freezing ocean between the two of you.
Oh, wow.
You are in the exact same room. You're sitting mere inches away. I mean, you could reach out and touch their arm,
Right.
yet you feel profoundly, undeniably lonely.
Yeah, that is a heavy feeling.
Or maybe you've been on the exact opposite side of this dynamic.
Okay, the other side of the couch.
Yeah. You're in the middle of a conflict. The tension in the room is rising rapidly. The person across from you is getting louder. And they're practically begging you to just explain how you feel.
And you just can't.
Right? Your mind just goes entirely, terrifyingly blank. You feel this heavy, numbing sensation wash over your chest, and you physically cannot force the words out of your mouth.
You're completely frozen.
You want to speak, but your biology just shuts the entire system down.
It is an agonizing place to be, regardless of which side of that couch you happen to be sitting on.
It really is.
And what is so striking when you look at the psychological data is just how incredibly common this experience is.
Right.
We all face it, yet we rarely have the vocabulary to explain what is actually happening in the room.
And that is exactly what we are going into today. In this deep dive, we are on a mission to understand the profound psychology and the literal hardwired biology of emotional withdrawal.
Yes.
We really want to understand why people pull away. Like, why do we go to such extreme lengths to avoid the hard conversations that we know logically we need to have?
We know we have to have them, but we just run.
Exactly. And what is actually happening in our nervous systems when we simply shut down and walk away?
It's such a vital area to explore because, well, human beings are meaning-making machines.
Totally.
When someone pulls away from us or when we find ourselves unable to speak, we immediately assign a judgment to that behavior.
We make a story out of it.
Right. We call the other person cold or uncaring, or we call ourselves broken and cowardly. And we do all of this without understanding the invisible mechanical drivers behind the behavior.
So we've spent the last few weeks completely immersed in clinical psychology literature, deep dive behavioral essays, therapeutic models on adult attachment theory.
The heavy-hitting stuff.
Yeah, and even some fascinating new sociological research on modern dating phenomena. Our goal today is to take all of that complex theory and synthesize it.
To really break it down.
We want to hand you the blueprint to the hidden dynamics of emotional distance so you can actually understand the quiet spaces in your own relationships.
And if we really want to understand why relationships eventually end in complete silence or, why they fracture beyond repair, we cannot start at the end.
No, you have to rewind.
Exactly. We have to look at the incredibly subtle, quiet ways a relationship begins to erode while two people are still actively participating in it.
While they're still in the room.
Right. Emotional distance is almost never a sudden cliff you fall off. It is a very slow, very quiet fade.
Let's get right into that, actually, the slow fade. When you read through the clinical observations of couples in distress, it becomes so clear how insidious this process really is.
It sneaks up on you.
It does. It's almost never a massive cinematic screaming match where someone throws a vase and storms out the door.
Like in the movies.
Right, it's not that. It is a gradual daily erosion. Psychologists point to a whole constellation of signs that this fade is happening, and honestly, reading through them is uncomfortably relatable.
They really are. When clinical literature describes emotional distance, it essentially boils down to a state where one or both partners begin to feel fundamentally unseen.
Unseen.
Wow. Yeah, they are unmoored. And the very first domino to fall is almost always the depth of conversation. The dialogue in their relationship becomes strictly surface-level logistics.
I know exactly what you mean. You go from talking about your weirdest childhood memories, your strange anxieties about the future, the random chaotic thoughts you have while driving.
A lot of deep stuff.
Yeah. And you go from that to just becoming roommates managing a schedule. Like, did you take the recycling to the curb? What are we doing for dinner? How was the meeting? Good. It's purely transactional.
Exactly. The curiosity just dies. You stop exploring the other person's internal world. And following right on the heels of that conversational death is a decline in physical affection.
Right.
Now, We are not necessarily talking about sexual intimacy here, though that often fades too. We are talking about the disappearance of casual grounding touches.
The micro moments.
Yes. The hand lightly resting on the small of your back when you walk through a crowded room.
Or leaning your shoulders together while you watch a movie.
Right. Casually holding hands across the center console of the car. When emotional distance creeps into a dynamic, those little, almost unconscious moments of physical tethering completely vanish.
And the physical space between you in bed literally widens,
It really does.
which perfectly explains that feeling of being intensely lonely while you're in the exact same room.
Because the physical connection is severed.
Because you used to have all these little invisible tethers connecting you, and now they're all cut. You also start noticing that when you do try to talk, the other person seems a million miles away.
Like they're not fully there.
Yeah, maybe they used to really engage when you spoke, but now they're just giving you a glazed-over nod while they scroll through their phone. You are competing with a screen, and you are losing.
And because that gap is widening, you start to see a profound avoidance of any conversation that might cause friction.
You just don't want to rock the boat.
Silence starts to feel significantly easier than confrontation. But this is a trap.
Why a trap?
Because by suppressing the minor irritations and the small feelings of disconnect, the couple inadvertently carves a much wider chasm between them. We also see fascinating nonverbal cues emerge, like a marked reduction in eye contact.
That seems like such a tiny detail, but it's actually huge, isn't it?
It is monumental. Direct eye contact requires vulnerability.
Oh, that makes sense.
Couples who are emotionally connected naturally gaze at each other. It regulates their nervous systems. When someone is pulling away emotionally, they will unconsciously look past you.
They'll look anywhere else.
They will focus on the wall behind you, or their hands, or the television. Avoiding a direct gaze is a deeply powerful biological cue of withdrawal.
And as this is happening, the energy in the relationship completely shifts. The ease is just gone. Everything feels heavier.
Everything is a chore.
Right, and suddenly you notice that your partner has infinite patience for their coworkers or their friends, but zero patience for you.
Yes, that contrast is painful.
Suddenly the way you load the dishwasher is a catastrophic character flaw, but the idea of sitting down and planning a weekend trip together feels like asking them to climb Mount Everest.
Because there is this fundamental lack of effort directed toward the relationship while all their energy is diverted outward.
Which brings us to a specific term I found in the research. What is particularly fascinating, and honestly quite damaging, is when this slow fade isn't just a mutual drifting apart.
Right, when it's one-sided.
Exactly. It morphs into a specific unilateral behavioral pattern. In modern behavioral psychology, this is often referred to as microdumping.
Microdumping.
Yeah, when I was reading through our material, that term jumped off the page. It sounds so clinical, yet so perfectly descriptive of what modern dating often feels like.
It captures a very specific dynamic. Microdumping is a process of slow, deliberate withdrawal where one partner intentionally, or sometimes entirely unconsciously, reduces their effort and their emotional availability over a period of time.
So they just back away slowly.
Instead of sitting down like an adult and having an open, direct conversation about ending the relationship or taking space, they just slowly disengage.
They stretch it out.
They take exponentially longer to reply to text messages. They become incredibly vague about their schedule so they can avoid making future plans. They stop initiating entirely, leaving all the emotional heavy lifting to the other person.
So they're just checking out.
They are essentially testing the waters of a breakup, seeing how it feels to be apart, without actually having to do the terrifying work of initiating a breakup.
It makes me think of an analogy. It's sort of like having a smartphone battery that is just slowly draining in the background.
Oh, I like that.
You don't realize you have all these background apps silently consuming your power. You don't notice the percentage dropping from 80 to 70 to 60 until you go to make an important phone call and your phone just dies in your hand because you're suddenly at 1%.
You never saw it coming.
You didn't see the massive drain happening. You just experienced the sudden, shocking death of the battery.
Right.
But let me stop you right there and push back on this a little bit. Because it's easy to paint the person doing this as a villain.
It is very easy, yeah.
Is microdumping always this calculated, malicious, Machiavellian move? Because life gets incredibly overwhelming.
True.
Do people sometimes just get genuinely distracted by a brutal season at work or family trauma or financial stress, and it accidentally looks like microdumping? How do we separate malice from just being overwhelmed by life?
That is a phenomenal question, and making that distinction is crucial. The psychological literature addresses this directly.
And what do they say?
The reality is that the root causes of microdumping are almost never born of malice.
Really?
While it feels incredibly cruel to the person on the receiving end who is slowly being starved of affection, the person withdrawing is usually acting out of deep, paralyzing ambivalence.
Ambivalence. So they honestly just don't know what they want.
Exactly. They are not fully sure if they want to leave the relationship, so they unconsciously reduce their investment to see how it feels to step back.
It's like an emotional hedging of bets.
Yes. But more often than not, it stems from a profound avoidance of confrontation. Or, in a twisted bit of irony, it is a deeply misguided attempt to spare the other person's feelings.
Wait, really? They think stringing someone along is the nice thing to do.
Yes. They convince themselves that letting the relationship slowly and quietly fade away into nothingness is somehow kinder and less traumatic than sitting the person down and snapping the relationship in half with a direct, painful conversation.
So they think they are letting the person down easy.
Exactly.
I'll just slowly back into the bushes like Homer Simpson so it doesn't hurt as much.
That's the exact mentality.
But when you look at the psychological impact on the person left behind, that strategy completely backfires. It's
Yeah.
actually psychological torture.
It absolutely is, because the receiving partner isn't stupid. They feel the ambient temperature in the room dropping.
You'd always feel it.
But because the withdrawing partner won't explicitly say anything is wrong, the receiving partner is thrown into a state of intense anxiety and hypervigilance.
They're constantly on edge.
They become obsessed with reading the tea leaves. They are constantly scanning for microscopic signs of rejection, feeling entirely confused, and almost universally, they fall into a trap of intense self-blame.
Because if the other person won't tell you what's wrong, you assume you are what's wrong.
Naturally.
You wonder, did I talk too much at dinner? Am I not attractive anymore? Did I push them away?
It's maddening.
The lack of clarity makes it entirely impossible to grieve the loss of the relationship or to move forward, because you don't even officially know that the relationship is over.
Right.
So if microdumping and the death of curiosity and this gradual emotional distance are just the symptoms we see playing out on the surface of the couch, we really need to dig into the psychological DNA that makes someone act this way in the first place.
The root cause.
Why is one person's immediate instinct to grab their partner's hands and talk things out, while another person's instinct is to slowly back away into the shadows and pull up the drawbridge?
And that leads us directly into what is arguably the bedrock of relationship psychology adult attachment theory.
This is where the puzzle pieces really start to snap together, isn't it?
If you want to understand why an adult withdraws from love or conflict today, you actually have to rewind the tape back to their earliest days on Earth.
Back to childhood.
The pioneering work on this was done by psychologists John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth back in the 60s and 70s.
Right, I've seen those studies.
They weren't studying romantic couples, they were studying infants and their primary caregivers.
They were looking at how babies cry when their mothers leave the room and how they react when the mother comes back.
Precisely. They were observing the fundamental biological imperative of a human infant trying to secure safety.
Right.
But what behavioral researchers discovered a few decades later, people like Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver, is that these childhood survival models map almost identically onto our adult romantic and platonic relationships.
That is just wild to me.
The way we learn to secure love and safety when we were entirely helpless toddlers creates an incredibly durable blueprint for how we love, how we trust, and how we argue when we are 30, 40, or 50 years old.
It's wild to think that a dynamic established when you were in a crib is dictating how you text your spouse today.
But the research is undeniable.
There are 4 main attachment styles that dictate our relational behavior. Let's look at the baseline first, the secure attachment style.
This is what we consider the baseline for healthy, regulated connection. Adults with a secure attachment style generally have a very positive view of themselves and, equally importantly, a positive view of others.
They trust people.
They find it relatively easy and safe to become emotionally close to people. They are comfortable depending on their partners, and they are comfortable having their partners depend on them.
So they don't have a constant humming anxiety that the rug is going to be pulled out from under them.
Exactly. Because they experienced warm, consistent, and responsive interactions early in life, their brain has hardwired the expectation that relationships are, generally speaking, a safe place to reside.
Right.
When a conflict arises, they assume it can be resolved. Their internal framework is basically, I am inherently worthy of love, you are capable of giving it, and together we can navigate this problem.
I'm okay, you are okay, we are okay. It sounds incredibly peaceful.
It is the ideal. Yeah.
But then we move into the insecure styles, where things get complicated. Let's talk about the anxious preoccupied style.
In the anxious preoccupied style, the individual has a deeply negative view of themselves, but a highly idealized positive view of others.
Interesting.
They desperately seek very high levels of intimacy, approval, and responsiveness from their partners. But because they fundamentally doubt their own inherent worth, they live with a persistent underlying terror of abandonment.
So they might worry constantly that their partner doesn't value them nearly as much as they value the partner. They're always on the lookout for a slight drop in text frequency or a change in tone of voice.
Yes, their threat detection system for rejection is dialed up to 11. This can lead to them being overly dependent, highly emotionally expressive, and needing constant reassurance. Their internal alarm bells are almost always ringing.
Which brings us to the third style. And this is the one where we really start to see the mechanics of emotional withdrawal and micro-dumping light up.
The dismissive avoidance style.
Yeah.
This is the exact inverse of the anxious style. People with a dismissive avoidance style hold a very positive view of themselves, but a deeply negative, cynical view of others.
So they trust themselves, but nobody else.
Their primary drive in life is the preservation of their independence. They view themselves as entirely self-sufficient and invulnerable.
Like, I don't need anyone. I am an island. Relying on other people only ever leads to disappointment and pain.
That is the exact internal monologue. Because somewhere in their early development, relying on a caregiver resulted in being ignored, rejected, or suffocated.
So their brain adapted.
So, their brain learned a brilliant survival tactic. Simply stop needing people. They often suppress and hide their true feelings. And when they face the threat of rejection or the pressure of someone demanding emotional intimacy, they deal with it by simply distancing themselves from the source.
They pull back.
They don't fight, they just turn off the emotional faucet.
And finally, there's the fourth style, which seems like the most painful place to be trapped. The fearful avoidance style.
It is an incredibly complex and painful style to live with. A person with a fearful avoidance style holds a negative view of both themselves and others.
Wow.
Both. This style often stems from early childhood trauma, chaos, or abuse. Consciously, they desperately want emotionally close relationships, but subconsciously, they profoundly distrust closeness. They are terrified of getting hurt or betrayed.
So it's sort of like sitting in a car and stomping on the gas pedal and the brake pedal at the exact same time.
That is a perfect metaphor. The engine is roaring, they are expending massive amounts of emotional energy seeking intimacy, but the moment things actually get close and vulnerable, the brake engages.
They panic.
They panic, they suppress their feelings, and they completely withdraw to protect themselves. They are trapped in a chaotic, exhausting, come here, no, get away from me cycle.
Okay, so these four styles make sense conceptually. But how does the brain actually store this information?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Does it just sit in the background as a vague feeling? Because the clinical research brings in this fascinating concept called internal working models.
Yes, internal working models.
And specifically how our minds organize these attachment styles using what they call relational schemas. Let's unpack this, because this honestly blew my mind.
It's so cool.
The research describes these schemas as basically predictive algorithms running in our brains. They are if-then statements that our minds write based on our past experiences.
It is exactly like computer programming. A relational schema is a packet of information stored in your brain. It contains data about who you are, data about who the other person is, and a predictive script about how an interaction is likely to unfold.
Like a simulation.
So let's look at an example. If you have a secure attachment style, your brain has written a very positive schema. Your internal script might read, if I'm feeling deeply sad and I actively ask my partner for a hug, then my partner will respond warmly, they will hold me, and I will feel better.
The algorithm predicts a successful, safe outcome.
Precisely. But if you have an avoidant attachment style, your brain has written a totally different, highly defensive script based on past pain.
Right.
Your schema might read, if I express a vulnerable emotion or ask for comfort, then I will be mocked, ignored, or my partner will use it against me later. Or then my partner will become incredibly needy and suffocate my independence.
So before you even open your mouth to say, I'm sad, your brain has already run the simulation, predicted a catastrophic outcome, and told you to abort the mission.
You've already lost the battle.
You are reacting to a future that hasn't even happened yet.
And this hidden algorithm completely dictates what psychologists call our affect regulation strategies, which is just a clinical way of saying, how do you handle your anxiety when it inevitably flares up in a relationship?
Right. And there are three distinct strategies here that map onto those attachment styles.
Yes.
The first is the security-based strategy. This is the healthy loop. You feel a spike of anxiety. Maybe your partner has been quiet all evening. Instead of panicking, you seek closeness. You say, hey, you're quiet tonight. Are we okay?
A direct question.
Your partner responds positively. Oh, sorry, just a headache. Your anxiety drops back to baseline and you go on with your night.
The system works exactly as designed, but the second strategy is the hyperactivation strategy, which is typical of the anxious preoccupied style.
Okay.
In this scenario, you feel anxious that your partner is quiet, you seek connection, but maybe the partner is distracted or they give a vague response. Instead of self-soothing, your anxiety completely spikes.
Because your schema tells you they are leaving.
So you try even harder. You start frantically seeking connection, endlessly pursuing them, demanding answers, getting locked in this panic cycle until the partner finally relents and reassures you, or until you completely exhaust yourself.
It's an overwhelming demand for immediate relief. Which brings us to the third strategy, the core of what we are dissecting today.
The attachment avoidance strategy.
Yes, in the avoidance strategy, your anxiety flares up. But instead of seeking connection, your internal schema instantly predicts that reaching out will result in rejection or emotional suffocation.
Right.
So your nervous system's solution is brilliant in its tragedy. It gives up on getting a positive response before even trying.
You suppress the anxiety entirely. You shut down your emotional needs. You convince yourself you don't care anyway, and you physically and emotionally distance yourself from your partner.
You just walk away.
You build a fortress to protect yourself from the disappointment your brain has already guaranteed will happen.
It's an emotional preemptive strike. But let me ask you a very real-world question here, because human beings are incredibly messy, and we rarely fit perfectly into these clinical boxes.
Sure.
Can you be a mix of these styles? Like, is it possible that I could be totally 100% securely attached with my childhood best friend? We can talk about anything without fear. But the second I get into a romantic relationship, I turn into a dismissive avoidant vault who can't talk about my feelings.
It's not only possible, it is extremely common. The research provides a very clear framework for this, describing a hierarchical model of working models.
A hierarchy. So we have layers.
Exactly. The very top of your internal hierarchy, you have a general overarching attachment style. This is your default setting for the world at large.
Okay.
But sitting right below that general default, you have relationship-specific models. You have different highly tailored blueprints for different specific people in your life.
So I have a blueprint for my mom, a blueprint for my boss, and a blueprint for my partner.
Yes. You might have an incredibly secure schema with your friends because, over the last decade, that specific history has proven to be safe. They have never betrayed you.
That makes sense.
But maybe a severe romantic trauma in your 20s, or even the specific triggering dynamic of your current partner, activates a deeply avoidant schema exclusively in your romantic life.
Wow.
The information at one level of your mental hierarchy does not have to perfectly match the information at another level.
That makes an unbelievable amount of sense. It completely explains why someone can be the warm, empathetic life of the party, deeply connected to their siblings and colleagues, but completely shut down and cold the second their spouse asks them a vulnerable question in the kitchen.
They are literally operating on two different neurological scripts.
And here is where this entire conversation takes a massive, fascinating turn. Because this avoidance strategy, this shutting down, it isn't just a mental framework.
No, it's not.
It isn't just a conscious philosophical choice someone makes to be stubborn. When a conflict hits a certain pitch, it actually takes over the physical biology of the body.
This is a critical pivot in how we understand emotional withdrawal. We have to leave the realm of pure psychology and enter the realm of neurobiology.
Right.
Because when a highly avoidant person, or realistically, anyone who is pushed past their specific emotional threshold, is faced with an intense emotional conflict, they do not always actively, consciously choose to walk away or go silent.
It's not always a choice.
In many cases, their autonomic nervous system completely takes the wheel and forces their body to shut down.
We are talking about the freeze response.
Right.
Now, almost everyone listening has heard of the fight or flight response.
Right, classic biology.
You are hiking, you see a bear in the woods, your heart rate instantly spikes, your pupils dilate, blood rushes to your muscles. That is your sympathetic nervous system flooding your body with adrenaline, getting you ready to either throw a punch at a grizzly or run for your life.
Right. It is a high-energy, active mobilization state. But there is a massive body of research, most notably the polyvagal theory, developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, that highlights a third, even more extreme biological survival response.
Freeze response.
Yes, and this is governed by an entirely different system, the parasympathetic nervous system, specifically a channel called the dorsal vagal pathway.
The dorsal vagal pathway. Let's break that down because it sounds like a sci-fi term, but it is controlling our arguments.
The vagus nerve is an incredible, sprawling superhighway of a nerve that runs from your brainstem all the way down through your heart, your lungs, and into your gut.
Wow, it goes everywhere.
It constantly scans your environment for safety. The dorsal vagal pathway is an ancient evolutionary mechanism. When a threat feels so massive, so insurmountable, and so completely overwhelming that fighting back is impossible and running away is futile, the body initiates a systemic biological shutdown.
It pulls the emergency brake.
Exactly. It is designed to conserve energy and reduce physical pain in the face of certain death. In the wild, this is a gazelle going completely limp in the jaws of a cheetah, essentially playing dead.
That is an intense visual.
But here is the crucial translation to modern life. In our daily human relationships, the threat triggering this pathway is rarely a physical predator. It is emotional danger.
Emotional danger.
An intense argument, an unexpected biting criticism from a partner, or even the terrifying prospect of recalling a past trauma. Your autonomic nervous system actually cannot tell the difference between a physical tiger and a terrifying emotional confrontation.
Wait, are you saying the human body responds to a partner raising their voice or using a harsh, disappointed tone the exact same way it responds to a literal apex predator hunting it?
At a neurobiological level, yes. The body reacts as if biological survival has been completely compromised.
That is staggering. The research explains the mechanics of this beautifully using the concept of an amygdala hijack.
Right.
The amygdala is our brain's alarm center.
Right.
It's the smoke detector. When it senses this intense emotional threat, it sounds the alarm so loudly and so aggressively that it actually overrides and temporarily shuts down the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is the sophisticated part of our brain situated right behind our forehead.
The thinking part.
Yeah, it is responsible for logic, rational reasoning, and most importantly, language.
That is the linchpin of this entire phenomenon. The language center of the brain literally goes offline.
It just shuts down.
The blood flow changes. The person loses the biological ability to articulate their complex feelings in that specific moment.
I love the analogy of a circuit breaker for this. Think about the electrical panel in the basement of your house.
Okay.
If you go into your kitchen and you plug in a high wattage space heater, a hair dryer, a microwave, and blender all in the exact same electrical circuit, you create a massive power surge.
A total overload.
What happens? The breaker violently trips. It cuts the power to the kitchen entirely. Everything goes dark and quiet. Now, the circuit breaker didn't do that because it's broken. It did that because it is functioning perfectly. It cut the power to prevent the wires inside the walls from melting and burning the entire house down.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize what is happening inside the human body. When there is a massive emotional power surge, too much anger, too much fear, too much sensory input, the nervous system trips the biological breaker.
So when someone is freezing on the couch, their internal house isn't necessarily burning down, but the lights have been completely shut off to protect the system.
Exactly.
The heart rate actually drops, their breathing gets very shallow, they might stare blankly at the wall, and they might even feel physically detached from their own body, almost like they're floating above it.
Now connect this back to the relational dynamic playing out in the living room. Think about how this profound biological freeze state is interpreted by the partner sitting on the other side of the couch.
Right, because they don't know the circuit breaker tripped.
The partner is trying desperately to resolve an issue. They're asking pointed questions, they are pleading for engagement, and they are met with a blank stare, a slack jaw, and complete silence.
It looks so cold.
Almost universally, this biological shutdown is misinterpreted by the partner as cold apathy, extreme disinterest, or deliberate manipulative silent treatment.
The partner thinks, you literally do not care enough about me or this relationship to even formulate a response. You are punishing me.
Yes.
But the heartbreaking reality is that the frozen person is experiencing profound, paralyzing internal overwhelm.
Yeah.
They aren't an empty vessel withholding love. They are a system that has been completely overloaded and tripped offline.
Precisely. And clinical psychologists connect this extreme state heavily to a fascinating concept called alexithymia.
Alexithymia, that is the inability to identify and describe emotions, correct?
It is.
But how does that actually feel from the inside? If I ask a partner who struggles with alexithymia, why are you sad? Do they know they are sad and just can't find the English word for it? Or is the feeling itself just a chaotic blur?
It is much closer to the latter. The brain hasn't properly categorized the physiological sensation into a recognized emotional bucket. They might feel a tightness in their chest or a buzzing static in their head, but their brain cannot attach the label of sadness or fear to that physical sensation.
So they literally don't know what they are feeling.
Right, and what the research shows is that over time, prolonged cognitive load, chronic emotional stress, or early childhood learning where a child learns that expressing feelings is dangerous can literally hardwire this disconnect.
The brain adapts again?
The brain essentially writes a rule feeling, and expressing these specific emotions is a threat to our survival, so we will proactively cut the communication cord between the body and the language center.
Wow.
It makes the shutdown feel completely automatic. The person freezing doesn't feel a sense of Zen calm. They feel a profound, terrifying disconnection.
Which is such a massive, necessary reframe for anyone listening.
It truly is.
If you are the person who chronically freezes during conflict, you are not fundamentally broken. You are not a flaw to be fixed. You are not a coward. Your body is flawlessly executing an ancient survival program. You are human.
You are doing exactly what your biology thinks will keep you alive.
But here is the tragic friction of modern life. If our bodies are hardwired to literally shut down during active, heated conflict, how does that reality affect the conversations we know we need to have, but constantly put off?
Right, the daily stuff.
The rent needs to be paid, the boundary needs to be set, the relationship needs to be defined. This leads us right into the agonizing, frustrating world of conflict avoidance.
This is exactly where the biological autonomic freeze response bleeds into our daily conscious behavioral choices. Because humans are smart.
We learn to avoid the fire.
If you know, consciously or subconsciously, that entering into a conflict causes your internal system to overload, panic, and shut down, you are naturally going to start arranging your entire life to avoid anything that might trigger a conflict.
You start walking on eggshells in your own home. The behavioral literature outlines several massive psychological barriers that keep us silent when every fiber of our being knows we should be speaking up.
Yes, there are a few major ones.
The first, quite obviously, is this sheer fear of escalating the conflict. We have a tendency to play the tape forward and imagine the absolute worst-case scenario.
Catastrophizing.
If I tell my partner their joke hurt my feelings, they will get defensive, then they will yell, then we will bring up the past 5 years of resentment, and then we will break up. So to prevent the breakup, I just swallow the hurt and stay quiet.
The literature also highlights a pervasive sense of low self-esteem as a major barrier to communication.
How so?
If an individual fundamentally believes that their feelings do not matter or that they do not deserve to take up emotional space in the relationship, they will preemptively silence themselves.
They dismiss themselves.
Exactly. They're deeply afraid of being dismissed by their partner, so they do the painful work of dismissing themselves first.
And then there is perfectionism, which I found absolutely fascinating when reading the behavioral essays. We usually think of perfectionism as alphabetizing your bookshelf or color-coding your calendar.
Right.
But emotional perfectionism is the paralyzing need to completely control the outcome of a conversation.
Having the perfect script.
Yeah, if you feel like you have to say everything exactly right, or if you hold a terrifying belief that one slightly misplaced word will ruin the relationship forever, you end up saying nothing at all. You are constantly waiting for the perfect time with the perfect, unassailable script to bring up your feelings, which of course never arrives.
Because there is no perfect script for human emotion. What is so illuminating here is a concept that researchers call the invisible erosion of a relationship.
Invisible erosion.
We often assume that a relationship ends because someone never spoke up. But invisible erosion occurs when someone has repeatedly tried to explain their feelings.
Oh, so they did try.
They have brought up the core issue, gently, carefully, maybe half a dozen times over a year. But each time they muster the courage to speak, they are met with a wall of defensiveness, immediate misunderstanding, or the conversation instantly pivots into a litigious debate about who is objectively right, rather than an empathetic exploration of how the people feel.
Let me push back on this idea of always speaking up, though. Because society constantly feeds us this narrative of, I'm just keeping the peace.
Yeah, we hear that a lot.
Isn't keeping the peace sometimes the mature adult thing to do? Like, why rock the boat over every tiny perceived slight or minor feeling if bringing it up is just going to cause a massive, exhausting fight? Don't you have to pick your battles in a long-term relationship?
It is an incredibly common defense mechanism to frame silence as maturity, but the clinical psychology on this is definitive.
What does it say?
Keeping the peace by chronically suppressing your authentic feelings does not actually maintain peace in the relationship. It just internalizes the war within yourself.
Wow. You don't eliminate the conflict? You just move it into your own body.
Precisely. It builds a quiet, highly toxic reservoir of resentment. Through a process psychologists call avoidance coping, your nervous system learns a dangerous lesson. Speaking up equals an emotional threat.
Oh, wow.
So every time you swallow your feelings to supposedly keep the peace, you are actively training your own brain that your voice is a dangerous weapon that must be kept locked away.
And you can only swallow so much before you choke. Over time, this invisible erosion leads to a critical emotional tipping point.
The booking point.
The person eventually realizes that explaining their feelings, pleading for change, or trying to be understood is exactly like standing in an empty room and shouting at the walls. You are just echoing.
Yeah.
You are not being heard. The sound is just bouncing back at you.
You're exhausting.
So the sheer bone-deep exhaustion of trying to be understood finally outweighs the innate human desire to connect.
Yes. That is the exact moment the slow fade becomes permanent. They don't leave the relationship in a fiery, dramatic rage. They leave in a state of quiet, hollow exhaustion.
They just ghost.
Because eventually, the absolute silence finally feels safer and more peaceful than the words that never worked.
So this profound exhaustion, this desperate preference for silence to protect a fried nervous system, it ultimately leads to the final physical severing of the relationship, the end of the line.
Right.
And the sociological data shows us that this final exit can take a few radically different forms in the modern world, which brings us to our final section. The final fade, looking deeply at ghosting versus the concept of the quiet exit.
Let's begin with ghosting, as it has undeniably become a defining, ubiquitous feature of the modern digital landscape. The research literature specifically breaks down the psychological triggers that lead someone to ghost another human being.
Right, and just to define it clearly, ghosting is when someone you are talking to, casually dating, or even in a committed relationship or friendship with, suddenly and completely ceases all communication without a single word of explanation.
They just vanish.
You send a text and you never hear from them again. It is jarring, it is disorienting, and it is incredibly traumatic for the person left holding their phone, wondering if the other person is dead or just cruel.
And while it feels like a monolithic act of cruelty, researchers have identified several distinct drivers behind the behavior. The first, and perhaps the most common, is sheer convenience.
Just pure convenience.
From a purely practical standpoint, it is infinitely easier and less confrontational to simply delete an app or block a number than to endure the emotional friction of a breakup conversation.
The technology basically enables our worst avoidant instincts.
It absolutely does. The second reason deeply connects back to what we discussed regarding alexithymia, a perceived lack of communication skills.
Okay, so they don't know what to say.
The ghoster feels an overwhelming pressure to explain why they are leaving, but they feel they literally do not possess the vocabulary or the emotional tools to articulate their internal state. Staring at a blinking cursor is so intimidating that they choose the void instead.
So they just say, I don't know how to say I'm not feeling this, so I will say nothing.
It's cowardice born of inadequacy.
The third reason is far more complex. It's when there is legitimately no alternative. The research found numerous cases where someone repeatedly tried to end a relationship, but the other person aggressively refused to accept the breakup, continually argued, or wouldn't let them leave peaceably.
Oh, so they couldn't leave normally.
In those high-control dynamics, ghosting becomes the only viable escape hatch. Similarly, the fourth driver is undesirable or unsafe behavior.
Like abuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
If a partner or date is being emotionally abusive, exhibiting racist behavior, or showing stalker-like tendencies, ghosting is no longer an avoidant mechanism. It is a vital matter of physical and psychological safety.
You do not owe an abuser a polite exit interview.
Exactly. The fifth factor revolves around the length and intensity of the relationship. In modern dating, if two people have only exchanged messages on an app or gone on one mediocre coffee date, many people feel that the social contract does not require a formal declaration of ending.
Right, if you barely know them. The sixth reason is, incredibly, that misguided attempt we mentioned earlier to protect the other person's feelings.
Again, with the trying to be nice.
The ghoster deludes themselves into believing that sudden, absolute silence is somehow less cruel and damaging than explicitly saying, I am not attracted to you, or I don't enjoy your personality.
They shield themselves from the guilt of inflicting pain while inflicting maximum psychological damage. Because as we know, the brain hates an open loop. Being ghosted triggers massive abandonment anxieties.
And the final reason noted in the literature is simply that ghosting has become the new normal. The medium is the message. Dating apps are structurally built on swiping, matching, and unmatching with zero friction. The technology itself facilitates and normalizes human disposability.
The psychological impact on the person ghosted cannot be overstated. It leaves them stranded in a state of ambiguous grief. They are rejected, yet denied the closure necessary to process the rejection.
It's agonizing.
Now, I want to pivot and contrast that painful, confusing, and often cowardly act of ghosting with a very different concept that was brought up in the behavioral essays, the quiet exit.
The quiet exit. This is a very interesting concept.
The essays present this not as a toxic avoidant behavior, but as a highly empowering, deeply intentional strategy to leave a very specific type of relationship, namely a toxic or chronically uncommitted situationship.
This is a vital, nuanced distinction. A situationship is a modern dynamic where you are providing all the emotional and often physical investment of a committed relationship, but the other person aggressively refuses to offer any actual commitment, clarity, or consistent effort in return.
You are stuck in a gray area.
The quiet exit is a deliberate, staged strategy to reclaim your own emotional power without needing to demand a dramatic, cinematic confrontation that you already know, based on past evidence, will not yield any real results or closure.
The literature breaks the quiet exit down into three distinct phases. Phase one is the internal shift.
The mindset change.
Yeah. This happens entirely inside your own mind. You consciously stop waiting for closure from them. You recognize powerfully that their ongoing ambiguity, their mixed signals, and their lack of effort is your closure.
That's a huge step.
You literally write a declaration of emotional independence in your own mind, asserting your self-worth and accepting the reality of the dynamic.
Once that internal shift happens, you move to phase two, the gentle withdrawal.
What does that look like?
This is the implementation of a strict less is more policy. You do not send a fiery, accusatory paragraph blowing up their phone. You simply methodically slow down your own output.
You just match their energy.
If you normally reply to their texts in 5 minutes, you begin replying in 3 hours. You make your availability vague. You politely decline their last-minute, low-effort dates without offering elaborate, apologetic excuses. You slowly, steadily remove your energy from their orbit.
And phase three is zero contact. You move to blocking, muting, or deleting old texts. But the crucial distinction here is the intent.
The intent is everything.
You are not blocking them to punish them or to manipulate them into missing you and reaching out. You are doing it to redirect that massive, exhausting amount of mental energy you were wasting on analyzing their mixed signals and pouring it entirely back into your own life, your self-care, your actual friendships, and your passions.
It is entirely about conserving your own peace and protecting your nervous system.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here, because I know people listening are thinking this. I have to ask a highly critical question.
Go for it.
Isn't the quiet exit literally just ghosting someone else? Like, isn't this just a clever therapeutic rebranding of ghosting so that we can feel morally superior while doing the exact same avoidant thing to someone else?
It is a totally fair question, and on the surface, the behaviors look similar. But if we connect this back to the broader picture of psychological contracts, there is a fundamental structural distinction between the two.
Okay, what is the distinction?
Ghosting is the unilateral abandonment of a mutual commitment or a reasonable, established expectation of communication without any warning. You are in a mutually established reciprocal dynamic and you vanish out of fear or convenience.
Right.
The quiet exit, however, is the act of withdrawing your energy from an arrangement that has explicitly and repeatedly refused to offer you commitment or clarity in the first place.
Ah, the rules of engagement are different.
Completely different. If someone is intentionally keeping you in a confusing gray area, tossing you emotional breadcrumbs to keep you attached, and flat out refusing to define the relationship or meet your stated needs after you have already tried to address it like an adult, you do not owe them a formal, agonizing breakup conversation.
Because they repeatedly refuse to formally be with you.
Exactly. The quiet exit is not an act of avoidance. It is the act of setting a firm, impenetrable internal boundary and walking away from a space that is actively causing you harm. It is profound self-protection, not punishment.
That distinction changes everything. If they refuse to sign the contract, you do not need to file for divorce. You just politely stand up, push your chair in, and leave the negotiation table.
Well said.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and slowly summarize the incredible winding journey we've been on today. We started by looking at the reality of the slow fade, how emotional distance doesn't happen overnight, but creeps in through surface-level logistics, a chilling lack of physical touch, and the confusing, draining process of microdumping.
Yeah.
We then took that surface behavior and traced it all the way back to the psychological blueprints we formed as infants, exploring how our adult attachment styles, especially the avoidant ones, write deep if-then scripts in our brains that convince us that emotional closeness is a dangerous threat.
The internal working models.
From there, we looked at the hard, undeniable biology of this withdrawal. We discovered that when the amygdala gets hijacked by conflict, the dorsal vagal pathway triggers a profound, systemic freeze response. It acts exactly like a circuit breaker that literally cuts the power to our language centers to protect us from a perceived fire.
And we saw how the agonizing exhaustion of echoing in an empty room leads us to inevitably avoid the difficult conversations we know we need to have.
And finally, we explored how relationships permanently sever, either through the painful, confusing cowardice of ghosting or the empowering, boundary-setting strategy of the quiet exit from a toxic dynamic.
And if there is one single resonant truth to take away from all of this information, it is the vital importance of looking at these behaviors through a lens of profound compassion.
For ourselves and others.
Whether you are the person who tends to panic, shut down, and freeze when the emotional tension rises, or you are the one sitting agonizingly on the couch as you feel your partner pulling further and further into the distance, it all traces back to the exact same source. It is a very human nervous system that is simply trying, in its own highly imperfect, messy way, to protect itself from pain. You are not broken. You are human.
And as you mull over your own relational blueprints and the schemas running in your own mind, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to explore on your own.
What is that?
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about how our biology has evolved over thousands of years to freeze, to distance ourselves, and to pull the emergency brake to avoid emotional threats.
Right?
But look at the hyper-digital world we live in right now. We have dating apps where you can completely erase a human being from your life with a single swipe of a thumb.
Just gone.
We have read receipts that we endlessly analyze like ancient glowing runes to determine our worth. We have the technological ability to instantly block someone from our existence with the casual tap of a screen.
It's too easy.
Are these modern technologies actually enabling our most ancient evolutionary escape hatches? Are we technologically empowering our own emotional avoidance, making it easier than ever in human history to simply never have to face the necessary discomfort of real, messy human conflict?
That is a fascinating question.
It is something to seriously think about the next time you feel the urge to leave someone on read.
If this conversation felt true for you, if something in here landed, we would love for you to subscribe to Leone Patterns so you never miss what we explore next.
Leave a comment and tell us, what did this bring up for you? We read every single one.
We are building a community here. People who think about human behavior differently, not as a problem to fix, but as a human experience to understand.
You are not alone in this.
No.
And we are genuinely glad you are here at Leone Patterns. Same pace, same questions. See you then.